Gentlemen, VUX World. I'm your host, as always, Kane Sims, and on our 4th anniversary week, I am delighted. I was actually going to bring some more merch. I've just had some more merch done, new caps, new t-shirts, but it's absolutely freezing, so I'm all wrapped up. But thank you for joining us. As always, we are going to dive deep into natural language processing, voice automation, conversational AI, and a whole bunch of stuff. We have Shawn Edmunds, who's the Chief Revenue Officer at LumenVox, joining us today, and we're going to get into all of the LumenVox capabilities, speech to text, and all this bunch of other stuff, biometrics. And we're going to be talking about the market, the technology, the challenges, and the solutions that LumenVox provides. So we're going to get into that in just one moment. But before we do that, a shout out to our presenting sponsors today, Deepgram and Symbl.ai. Deepgram is one of the leading automatic speech recognition providers. It is powering companies all over the world. Startups and established companies are using Deepgram to fuel their voice bots and all kinds of use cases requiring ASR. They have incredible accuracy, incredibly cost effective, and they will actually also do a benchmark if you're looking for a speech recognition provider, benchmark against some of the other providers, and hopefully it proves its worth. So do check out Deepgram. If you are in the market for some speech recognition, you can visit deepgram.com/VUX World. And our other presenting sponsor is Symbl.ai, which is a conversational intelligence platform. And if you go to Symbl.ai, that's SYMBL.ai, for those of you that are tuning in on the podcast, and sign up there, you will see how easy it is to add a simple but powerful call coaching and call tracking functionality to your customer experience solutions. Symbl.ai's customizable conversational intelligence APIs that let you hook into calls, videos, text conversations, and apply best-in-class contextual AI in no time at all. You can build all kinds of stuff. The limit is your imagination. One of the real cool use cases is agent assist. So, we talk a lot about conversational automation, and a huge area of opportunity for contact centers and for customer experiences in using this technology to help agents be more productive. And you can build that with Symbl.ai. So do check out SYMBL.ai for more. That's Symbl.ai, SYMBL.ai. Thank you to Deepgram and Symbl.ai for presenting VUX World on our 4th anniversary week, which I am super, super pleased with and super excited about. Now, without further ado, we have the CRO of LumenVox, Mr. Shawn Edmunds, joining us on VUX World. Shawn, welcome.
Thank you, Kane. Happy to be here.
It's a pleasure, and thank you for coming in at short notice. I know we had to do a little bit of reshuffling, and so I appreciate your flexibility for stepping into the helm.
Absolutely. Everybody's going to have to deal with the less attractive, less intelligent version of the C-level who's going to be here today from LumenVox. So hopefully I can live up to some expectations.
Well, I think you might be underselling yourself a bit there, Shawn, because I can see from your LinkedIn profile you've got a vast amount of experience at a bunch of different companies, and one of which was Nuance. So you've been around the conversational AI, natural language processing, kind of emerging technology space for the vast majority of your career, by the looks of things. So you obviously know your stuff.
I do. I've been privileged to have experienced AI in its various forms, starting with Nuance on the speech side and then the voice biometric side, diving deeper into the VB side over my career, looking at it from a network perspective, from a CPaaS perspective. I've also had the experience of looking at how behavioral analytics and machine learning and natural language processing can be utilized in a MarTech space. So I'm pretty excited about what we're doing here at LumenVox because I've, as you said, I've kind of been around the block a bit, and I think that there's a really interesting trend or a series of trends that are taking place that we're excited to participate in.
Interesting. So we'll get into those trends definitely over the course of the conversation. But first, what was your kind of I'm looking at companies like Intelliquent, Akizian. Is that how you pronounce it? Akizian? Is that pronounced right?
I don't remember which one.
Akizian, it looks like. and then looking at web RCT and Nuance. So basically, it's a long-winded way of kind of trying to kind of climb into some of your kind of previous experiences, previous roles, and kind of like tracking your journey essentially through this kind of space. Was Nuance the first opportunity you had to work in this kind of technology space, or were you working on something before that?
Well, it was a little bit of a dabble in it when I was at Nokia, when we were looking at different ways to manage and facilitate. This is way before anything was technically a cloud, but managing contacts and contents in a pseudo kind of cloud environment at that time for large carriers, telecommunications companies. And then with Nuance is really when I got into the speech side of the business and was able to really kind of dig into what I felt at the time was its infancy in terms of how NLU was evolving into a very valid capability when you look at anything that has to do with customer engagement. And from that point forward, as you can kind of see, some of the areas I wanted to explore had to do with how does this use case manifest itself in different parts of, let's say, the customer journey, whether it's a network side, right? Whether it's the authentication side, whether it's a proactive outbound element in the MarTech side, as I'd mentioned before. But it's interesting, it kind of all led me back to LumenVox and really understanding how to position technologies in the ID, speech, AI broadly speaking space as this market continues to evolve. I mean, as you are probably aware, it's every other week there's some new announcement going on, whether it's a roll up or a new product or a new service or something, perhaps all the above. And it's just such a dynamic place to play right now, and it's exciting, and it's going to be even more exciting to talk to you about kind of our perspective and what we're seeing as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you kind of touched on it. Even this week, we've saw Unifor's raised $400 million. Cognigy's raised, I think it's a Series B, 58 million euros. I think it might be. We tallied up last year. We did some analysis looking at the various companies that had raised, and I think that out of something like, it wasn't like, obviously there was far more companies that had raised money over the course of last year, but we picked out, like, I think there was 40, and there was something like 2.9 billion raised or something like that amongst like 40 companies, some of which are like small and raised a couple of million, some of which were like Genesis or whatever raised 500 million. So there's so much activity going on in this kind of space. How would you summarize, like, is all of this investor activity kind of part of the hype cycle, or is it a sign of real true belief in the future of this technology?
I think it's a sign of real true belief because the hype cycle's been going on for some time. I mean, if you go back to circa 2009, 2010, there was always the promise of these technologies actually changing the way an enterprise or a company engages with an end customer. You're seeing the manifestations of that right now in real time. It's happening. I mean, you're experiencing it when you are talking to your cable company, talking to your bank, talking to your favorite retail outlet or store. You're, in many ways, probably thinking you're talking with someone, but you're actually talking with something. And the trend that is starting to even further accelerate where these technologies can be used is, if you think about the way you want to engage, if you have a question, right? If I need to understand something, perhaps it's a flight or something on my bank account. If you go back even 10 years, that can be a cumbersome process. You could be on the phone for 10, 15, 20 minutes. You start to perhaps get a little annoyed. And the advent of and the dispersal of these types of technologies in every step in the customer engagement journey has really made that experience one that is more palatable, but also in some cases, I would go as far as saying delightful. If I can get an to my question in seconds rather than minutes, it's going to make it so I am going to have a positive perspective on that particular brand.
Yeah, seconds instead of multiple tens of minutes in many cases.
Oh yeah.
I was literally on the phone, trying to get onto the phone with a mortgage company, and literally this was last week, and there was the actual kind of introduction into the call wasn't that bad. I wouldn't have said there was a mixture of like DTMF press one for this, and then you hit a voice bot. But then you had to put your reference numbers in, so it defaulted to DTMF again. And that part of it kind of seemed to be, it was a bit clunky as far as an experience is concerned, but it kind of got me through. And then what happened is I was obviously in a queue, and I was on hold, but I didn't realize I was on hold because the line was just ringing, and it was just constant ringing constantly for ages, and I was just completely confused, like, what on earth is happening here? They've obviously got the technology within the IVR to be able to just come on every now and then and say, look, you're in a queue, don't worry, someone will be here soon, or whatever it might be, or start taking some more information from me. All the opportunities there, but I'm sat there confused. It was a really weird experience.
Yeah, no, I've got one better for you, which is a problem. I mean, with everything that's happening, there still is problems, items, areas that could be better. And again, that's, as we talked today, that's really where LumenVox is focused. But this use case was one. I was coming back from a business trip, which was the first time in a long time. This was about 3 months ago or so. Late at night, just wanted to get home and trying to catch, it was either a Lyft or an Uber. And long story short, for whatever reason, it needed my address, or the credit card, I should say, needed my address, or it had to confirm, had just moved. It had to confirm my new zip code. And that process of, because I was walking, I didn't have, nor did I want to, I was trying to get out to the queue or get to the street to get the Uber. So I was speaking my address. And that simple act of speaking my address, alphanumerics and such, the experience started to fall down so much, in a very similar fashion, I should say, to what you experienced. The initial part of queuing me up to just have that simple question answered was great. But once I got there, it was 10 minutes later and having to speak to a rep. And even at that point, there seemed to be a disconnect, right? In terms of why I was actually calling in. And then there was no history presented. So, and this is with a major multinational credit card company. This isn't, anything that you would say, oh, well, a small mom and pop shop. So it's that area, or I should say that use case is one that there is opportunity to provide a better mousetrap. And that's an area where I think we still have a bit more to go. And as an enterprise in this space, I still feel that there's a tremendous amount of opportunity to build and to create a more, again, delightful customer experience.
Absolutely. So tell us about LumenVox then. Tell us, for someone who's never heard of LumenVox before, I'm sure there's plenty of people tuning in that have. There may be some that haven't. Do you want to fill us in on, how would you describe LumenVox to someone who hasn't come across it previously?
Well, we've been around for 20 years. But one of the things I will say is the LumenVox today is really the evolution of two companies coming together, Voice Trust and LumenVox. And in the last 4 months, we really set a course to almost redefine who we were. We invested a tremendous amount in our technology. And what LumenVox provides is we provide speech experience technology. I would say, if I look in the market today, it's a bold statement, but I'll make it. We're the only pure technology player, truly agnostic, that's out there in the market that provides the full spectrum of speech technologies, everything from natural language to transcription, ASR, TTS, biometrics. When you pull all those together, it is a total speech experience. And we provide the building blocks to some of the biggest brands in the world who then in turn provide their solutions to end customers. And that can be any number of customer engagement, conversational AI related solutions or services.
And this year is the 20th year, isn't it? Is it the 20th year anniversary this year?
Yes, it is. It is.
Nice.
Yeah, we're excited.
Yeah, it's tell you, it's what is it? I can't remember the stat, but it's certain, lots of businesses fail very early. I'm quite, proud to be here 4 years in, but 20 years is like, it takes some doing, and especially with a technology type. I mean, you could probably compare LumenVox maybe to Nuance, perhaps, another company who's been at it for quite a long time. And I think now I'd be interested in getting your perspectives on this, related to the questions we were getting on a little bit earlier about is it hype or is it prime time ready? Is that I imagine that in maybe the time 2013, whatever it was, when you were at Nuance, and even before that, when Nuance and LumenVox were getting started, I imagine it was a totally different market, totally different kind of expectations. Whereas now, a lot of people seem to be aware of this technology, at least aware, broadly speaking, of the value that it can add. Maybe not all aware of how it can be implemented, perhaps, but there's generally more awareness now than there was then. I'm wondering whether you might be able to shine a light on what you think some of the either differences or comparisons are between, the Nuance of 2013 when you were there, and what things were like at that time versus where things are today. What do you think some of the main differences might be?
Well, I would say that in short, hopefully you all you're going to get a funny still picture if I'm saying what my view is on the screen, but hey,
it's moving. It's moving.
The way we're doing everything remote nowadays. So what's the difference? I would say that in those days, there was a bit of, on the basic level, you knew that speech was needed, right? So to your point, DTMF, short phrases, directed dialogue, and so forth. But really intent and kind of using it to replace what would be an agent engaged type of experience for a customer was still pseudo in its infancy. Where we are today, and one of the things that LumenVox has really put an emphasis on is now it's kind of the democratization of all of that. You want to be able to build these different experiences for a variety of different use cases, but you need to be able to do it in a way that it's simply put not going to break the bank. Two, you need to have a technology at its core that is future-proofed, right? It needs to work out of the box. It needs to be reliable. It needs to be easy to use, and it needs to scale. And if I were to kind of take a view back from 2013 to now, it is the position that LumenVox is built to kind of handle those use cases, simplicity, scale, cost effectiveness, that has given us and given many of our customers the ability to do things that perhaps would have cost 7, 8 digits in the old days, or 7, 8 figures in terms of the licensing cost and the support cost, to do it for a fraction of that, but not sacrifice anything on the experience side. And that's where I think you've seen the evolution of the space. So you've got players like LumenVox today that can bring best-in-class technology and do it so that virtually anyone in the market can partake and build any type of experience using our tools and our technology.
Interesting. And so let's walk through the stack then. So there's automatic speech recognition. There is, you mentioned voice biometrics. There is call progress analysis, which I'd love to get into that in a short while. That sounds really interesting. Text to speech, which is actually pretty unique because entirely different technology-wise to everything else. Everything else that we mentioned so far is all about understanding, whereas text to speech is purely about communicating back over. And it's quite fairly unusual that an organization has both the understanding part and the proprietary TTS part. So it'd be nice to get into that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Have I missed anything out there? in terms of speech recognition, biometrics, call progress analysis, text to speech,
natural language. So we
so
have
the NLU in there as well, natural language understanding.
We do. We have a product called the Gateway. Well, first of all, if you draw a line right through all of it, it's all speech related, right? And so at its core, that's what our stack, our technology stack, and we call them modules. Right. And so in each of those modules, you draw a line, again, straight through it. It is at its core, it's our speech engine, okay? Of which we just finished a fairly massive overhaul and update, moved everything into kind of microservices, Dockers and containers architecture, and put forward some of the most state-of-the-art approaches to all things speech with the DNN-based engine and so forth. So out of the box, what we're seeing in terms of the experience, it's amazing. But just to kind of get back to the point you were asking, because I wanted to save CPA. So if you look about everything you've talked about, conversational AI, right? One of the components in a portion of that experience, a good portion, is let's say that you were in an e-callback type of environment, right? You're calling in, you need to speak to an agent. You're not going to be able to address a conversational or vis-a-vis a conversational AI. The bot's not going to get it. But guess what? You're in a long queue. You don't want to wait online. What our product in call progress analysis does is it uses a component of our speech engine that detects human speech, and it does it, I would say, based on the customers that we work with today, better than most anybody in the world. We've been doing it for a long time, and we're doing it at massive scale. We're approaching close to 1 billion calls a month are laced with our speech engine. And why does that matter? Because when you're thinking about that customer experience, you're thinking about tools that make that better, and you're an enterprise thinking about, hey, I want to look at how can I make this a better experience. You don't want your agent to get connected to dead air or a voicemail. I mean, that has cost implications that are obvious. Every second has a cost implication. If you could get it near 100% right in that connection virtually every time, that again creates a better experience. It creates a better experience for the agent. It's a better experience for the customer. And that just is kind of the lead in to how we've kind of looked at our modules within our technology stack to create a better customer experience, being able to leverage any intent engine in the market and marry it with our ASR so that any language, high level of accuracy is married with any intent engine. Again, you can create really interesting experiences. And in short, you're seeing these trends in conversational AI, broadly speaking, where you're going to have a multitude of different use cases with any given enterprise, so that we give a lot of flexibility there. And that's kind of a point where we've really focused and emphasized quite a bit, is on this modular approach and being that total speech experience.
Interesting. So you can kind of take one portion of it and leave the rest if that's what your requirements dictate, or you can take the whole package and fully get up and running. So let's say,
that is correct.
Yeah. So let's say the only thing you mentioned, I think, that is perhaps you mentioned hooking up to any other intent engine. So I'm assuming that everything we're talking about here is all related to understanding the speech component, but there isn't a proprietary classifier, like a natural language understanding underneath. You kind of essentially would pair LumenVox capabilities either side of that natural language piece, ASR, biometrics, into any other natural language understanding unit, and then you have the LumenVox TTS at the other side. Am I understanding that right?
That's correct. So think of all of the different modules that we have and have mentioned when we talk about the gateway, and we'll be releasing our own NLU engine, but as the building blocks, right? We're a pure software company. Our goal is to provide as many tools as possible. So to the point you were making, identity becomes a factor in that. the text-to-speech element, the reverse of speech-to-text becomes a factor of that. And so it all sits in our stack, in our proprietary stack. And again, it gives those building blocks to customers to build those experiences.
What are some of the examples? Obviously, over the course of 20 years, you're going to have lots of these to choose from. But what are some of the, like, let's say, standout use cases that spring to mind of like that customer is showing exactly how this technology should be used really, really well? What would some of those kind of examples? You don't have to necessarily name the clients and stuff like that, but just like examples of some of the use cases that you think are really like top draw.
Yeah, I'll do that. So one of the things, it's the good and the bad of being an OEM, right? It's the good and bad is you're the engine in many ways, and not everybody is going to say, hey, I want to broadcast the engine, but we're fine being the engine. But some of the use cases can be as simple as I'd mentioned before when we talked about companies who are tackling high level of accuracy and outbound notification payload delivery, reduction in average hold time, right? Better experiences in providing tools that bring conversational analytics, meaning you can mine our data or the data that is actually your data as an OEM to better understand your customers, better improve on the customer experience. And so as we are that technology only OEM, there's a good chance, because of the breadth of how we've deployed this over the years, and even more so over the last 2 years with just our crazy accelerated growth, that you're using us in one way, shape, or form today. And that's the exciting thing for us. And we're continuing to see some diversification in how customers are saying, can we marry identity and bring that into the conversational AI use case? And part of being able to do that is it can't be a heavyweight, data intensive module technology component or all the above, right? And part of the way we've looked to solve that is really architecting our entire stack. So we've solved for that. And then the last thing I'll make a point on is you are well aware, if you think about investments in speech and AI tools, biometrics and the like, one of the big issues that customers run in when they want to evolve, and I should say the enterprise, when they want to evolve the experience, you've invested, you've more or less built your own language model for your business. You've maybe enrolled everyone in some form of identification tool. Maybe it's a legacy biometrics product. So, moving to someone else, even though you can create a better experience, that can be a heavy lift. And one of the things we've really focused on is providing our customers tools so that they or we can help remove that barrier. So if you want to migrate off of another speech provider, we can, remove 95% of the uplift. If you need to migrate enrollments, we've provided tools and have tools that help simplify that. So again, it's kind of tackling it from the perspective of, you've got to be malleable. You've got to look at what the customer's needs are, and and you also need to realize that a lot of times these customers, these enterprises, it isn't going to be a flip of a switch for them to create something entirely new. And we want to make sure that we can provide something that can enable customers to future-proof their business.
What would be involved in a migration like that? Let's say, I don't know. Let's kind of say that let's say a company is using one speech recognition or one biometrics. Let's use biometrics. One customer is using, let's say, Nice or Nuance biometrics. Something's not quite happening. They're looking to put in a different solution that maybe has higher accuracy or whatever. What would a migration process look like? What are the steps that an enterprise could expect to go through if they were to migrate from something else into LumenVox?
Great question. I mean, we just got done tackling this for a fairly large customer where there was exactly that problem. There was an incumbent. They had millions of enrollments. And the lift was, how are we going to go back out? Getting someone to enroll when it's not a required action, it's an opt-in experience, no matter what it does to, make your, as an end customer's life easier dealing with, say, any sort of company that requires a level of identification, authentication. It's still steps, clicks, time. And so what we put together was a means where, and again, it's not, I should say a preface what I'm going to explain is, there are certain levels of what the customer, the enterprise already owns in terms of those enrollments that gives us access and the ability to kind of migrate those over. But we've built tools that, essentially will take that enrollment that's collected, and we can use that enrollment to essentially create a new enrollment. Now, because we don't host anything, we're not a service bureau, so all of our technology will reside in that customer's cloud, or in a private cloud, or in a public cloud that's kind of run by one of our partners or powered by one of our partners, because again, we're a technology provider. But what we've enabled them to do is you cut through some of the scenarios where PII data could come into play, because we're not holding anything, we're not touching anything, but we've built a methodology so that we can easily migrate those over when the conditions are right. And that's a big way for customers to say, okay, I want to create a better experience, because perhaps they want to move into something that is going to leverage biometrics and natural language and speech recognition in an entirely new way, but you don't want to go back out there and re-enroll everybody. Mm-hmm. So we've, again, provided a means to do that. And we do it, depending on the size, we do it in days, weeks, and when you start to get up there, depending on the customer's timelines, months, but it can be done. And that's something that we're finding in market right now is a bit unique.
Mm. Do you think that as time goes on, so you've got some companies who've been using similar technologies, you could probably look at excuse me, you could probably look at financial services, as you've kind of alluded to, insurance, banks, a lot of them are already using biometrics and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So they've got a lot of legacy technologies, but most companies these days, LumenVox being a prime example of this modular kind of approach. And as now more companies are starting to implement this technology for the first time over the last sort of let's say 10 years, 5 years maybe more so, but specifically on the conversational AI side, it's more prominent, I would say, over the last 5 years. However, companies that have a degree of experience with this technology have also come across the limitations of it. And at some point in time, they do, I think what we're going to see more regularly as well is companies are going to reach the limitations of something like Dialogflow or some other natural language understanding engine and want to switch it out for something else. They're going to reach the limits perhaps of Google's built-in automatic speech recognition because it can't be customized or tuned. Or I think it can these days, but you know what I'm saying? Like there's companies who are going to have had a degree of experience with this technology and for whatever reason want to start to switch it out. Whereas historically, I would say, and let's say you're a big bank, you've got a biometric solution working, it's been there for 10 years, probably less incentivized to switch it out potentially. I suppose the question I'm asking is, do you think that this concept of modular capabilities that companies will switch in and out of easier for different use cases is more likely to be the reality of either today or the future? Or do you think it's more likely that an enterprise chooses a biometrics provider like LumenVox and just sticks with that for the next 15 years?
Well, it's a great question. And the one item that I will say is that more than likely the enterprise is not going to search out LumenVox, because one of the areas that we've looked at, and you continue to see the manifestation of this with press releases that'll be coming out this year, different partnerships will be announcing is, providing, as biometrics as an example, an engine to other partners built experience that provide a more diverse set of use cases that that customer, that enterprise can either build around or grow with. So to answer the question on the modular side, from our perspective, what we've done is we've empowered our partners, because my customer at the end of the day is my partner, right? And because I'm providing an engine to them. And what I've done is I've enabled them to do some pretty diverse things with our stack so that they can in turn look to that enterprise, and in the case you made with a financial institution, and provide them a means to remove the barrier in the migration, but provide a better mousetrap, right? Because we've given the means or given the ability to OEM really capable modules so that they can build around it. And in turn, what ends up happening is and this happens quite a bit in the industry today, the bigger you get in this space, and you kind of mentioned some of the investments and roll-ups, inevitably you start to build your own solutions, right? And so the line grays a bit between being a technology provider and being a solution provider. So when you think about some of the problems in market, and I call them problems because it's where we're growing and we're solving for them, but where we've kind of really focused our energies on is being the LumenVox inside to a variety of different partners so that they can build and they see in turn the fruits of growing their brand or providing a more aggressive commercial structure that has them carry the lion's share of the revenue because they own all the services, and in turn create that better experience. So all the things you're talking about how you kind of take some of the legacy customers that are embedded, I think the way we've tackled it is you're giving ownership to the platform and solution providers, and they in turn are building very unique experiences, and we're helping them when they need to go into scenarios because of the tools I had mentioned with migration and implementation and integration, do it in a way that it can completely simplify the process. And you'll hear more about me kind of whether I broadcast this personally from LinkedIn or not. I mean, our goal is we want to change the industry. And we want to do it by providing this modular approach, but we do it because, as you had mentioned at the top of the call, and the theme of this call is that just seeing this real drive into how can you create that better experience. And it's not going to be done by just one company, right? It's going to be done by someone taking it upon them. So maybe a set of companies, maybe it's going to be a series of solution providers. But the tall and the short of it is that we want to be the one who provides that engine that helps drive that and be kind of a foundational element, not be the one that consumes and owns the entire project.
That makes sense. So you mentioned partners there. I'd be interested in trying to understand kind of where you'd likely come across a LumenVox. So, for example, would LumenVox be a solution that you mentioned that an enterprise might not necessarily go out and find LumenVox? When you say partners, are you talking about, like, for example, the other week, Five9 announced the pin drop integration. So I think it's biometrics or voice print or something like that. And then you have Nuance integrating into Genesis App Foundry. So there's a bit of a partnership kind of going on there. Are you talking about that level of partnerships where, let's say, it might be a partnership with Avaya and LumenVox is the kind of entity that provides Avaya's biometrics or ASR or something like that, maybe white labeled so that it's Avaya telling the world that they've got their own biometrics, but actually it's LumenVox in the background? Or are you talking about partners like system integrators, like, the Quantifiers and Sabios and maybe it's Deloitte or Accentures of the world, where they might be working with a company and bringing in different technologies to solve solutions? Like, who would be the company or the people that would implement this?
Well, we just had a press release this week about our partnership with Twilio. So take a look at that, really we've gone down the road of doing, again, more of a OEM type relationship with certain elements of their offering. And I use that just because it's so recent, because that is, I would say, the best example of when we talk about partners that I can bring to the table and make it super clear. Because from our perspective, we've been working with the likes of Genesis and Avaya, Cisco, Five9, Twilio, and a slew of others, where, again, we are a component of a much bigger solution that they've built. Maybe it's a feature of their platform. And that's really where our focus is because, the ownership of that experience is important. And owning the data outright, if you kind of look at what those customers are doing, at its most simplistic level, at the core of the stack, in their stack, being able to own that experience, that's the type of partner and customer that we've been focusing on. And that's where we're seeing the most, I would say, meteoric style growth over the last 2 years.
Interesting. And would it be like who would be the people that would actually use or build the solution? Would it be that LumenVox is kind of like a standoff, here's the technology, everything is there for a developer to go and kind of do it themselves, or graphical user interface so people can do it themselves? Or is it more kind of hands-on, like, hey, this is very specialist stuff, we know what we're doing with it and we'll kind of work with you to do it? Is it kind of like a standoff technology, almost like API or SaaS kind of model, or is it LumenVox needs to be involved to actually build a solution?
Yeah, it's another good question, because everybody, we kind of get, even at times internally, we try to align with saying, okay, what's a SaaS? But I mean, a SaaS is someone that's going to have and be their own service bureau. We've taken the approach of building the architecture so that you as a SaaS can leverage us and optimize that experience. And we've done so in a way that doesn't require heavy lifting in terms of building and developing, right? That's part of how we architected the platform. So our customer is going to be a product org in many ways. And to maybe do a further clarification, it happens to be that a lot of these platform providers and solution providers are leveraging us to build better experiences. But it can be an enterprise who wants to build a better experience. They just have to have the capability to build, right? We're not a custom application shop, right? Again, we've really focused on being that pure technology provider. And we're finding that there is absolutely a desire to control that experience more by the platform providers. And again, as I mentioned before, in turn, delivering that better experience to the enterprise. So for us, make it simple, make it cost effective, future-proof it, and most important, it needs to scale. And those are the four things. And I always kind of talk to when we entertain new customers in market. A lot of them are like, I want to see this, that, and the other. And 9 times out of 10, I point them to some of the customers that I've mentioned here to go see how we've been leveraged or manifested. And so that's kind of where I feel it's the best example of how scalable and let's just say cutting edge that we are and can be, so that it can be something where I'm not trying to show that I did a benchmark, and so my benchmark in my lab test was better than your benchmark in your lab test. It's more pointing them to real world deployments and letting them kind of see how some of our bigger customers have utilized us and continue to utilize us to build better experiences.
Interesting. It's a very interesting approach, isn't it, in terms of being the engine that powers these products, because ultimately you have the potential to reach more scale that way, really, because you can then focus on doing the product, making the technology work, making all of the actual stuff happen. But then you can utilize partners like Twilio and their huge network of customers to then get the technology rolled out and used. Is that kind of the framework? Is that basically LumenVox can focus on building the core technology and reach scale through kind of utilizing the partner networks?
I would say it's a little more simple than that, because I always have to make sure I'm super clear with anyone we talk about, because, you know, as a pure technology provider, what we want to do is we want to help our partners. We want to provide our partners with technologies so they can do something different in markets. So we're focusing our energies on just supporting them. Right.
Okay.
So it's really listening to what matters. How do they want to see the evolution of components of our stack? What matters to them within our speech technology stack? Is it a language? Is it a way to take a single API approach and access all the modules? Is it an architecture scenario, which we've mentioned and invested in? That's really where our focus is. So it's less about, you know, guiding for downstream and I would say it's not a scenario where we're in a partner ecosystem and someone's going to come to us and say, hey, LumenVox, can we do this? What it's going to be is, more than likely, you're not going to know that you're using LumenVox, because we've been helping those solution and platform providers by providing them with, you know, the best in class technology to build these speech experiences.
Interesting. Where do you think some of the we've talked about a few use cases. We've talked about the growth and rise of awareness and implementations of speech technologies in various guises. Where do you think some of the underutilized areas are, in terms of, like, where could, like, a potential partner be using some of or all of the LumenVox stack that is not currently being explored? Where do you think the gaps are, would you say?
Well, so there's more of a general, I think, opening, if you will, that is going to, and has yet, at least from what I've seen, really taken advantage of the data that's in this platform and in, you know, speech broadly speaking. I'm waiting for the marrying of kind of outbound and inbound engagement, right? When you start to see like real utilization and proactive engagement, and again, coming from my background when I was at CleverTap, looking at engagement and analytics and how that's used, and that's a proactive, you know, that's the Marcom world. How that can all be married, and, you know, when you start to see these CDP platforms marry all that data, I think there's still going to be, and there still is, opportunity to get creative when leveraging outbound engagement and identification and natural language and transcription and so forth, so that you can create this holistic experience, right? So I think the players, like everyone I've mentioned, the Five9s, the Avayas, the Twilios of the world, are going in the right, or heading in the right direction, because at the end of the day, you're starting to see how they're using, whether it's they're acquiring or they're pulling together massive amounts of data, create that better experience. But I think you're going to see some of the, you know, the Adobe Marketos of the world and so forth start to think and rethink how they can marry all this together. So I think, and I know that you're going to see this whole conversational AI scenario probably go through an additional evolution, or maybe 2 or 3 in the next 2 to potentially 5 years, so that, you know, everything's tied. All your devices are connected, whether it's your phone or your car or an Alexa, or in turn, you know, how you are notified, advertised to, marketed to, and then in turn, if you're, you know, a customer of that said company, how can you marry all that data to further create this really unique experience? I mean, it may get a little creepy at one point, but I suspect that it also will be something where, done right, it will be a bit of a game changer And that's where I kind of see openings and opportunities. And we're kind of excited to be partnering with a number of those companies who are really looking at how that's going to evolve, whether that's today or tomorrow.
Interesting. We've had this conversation about the Alexa and voice assistant ecosystems plenty of times, which is a question of where does the innovation come from? So to give you an example, with Amazon Alexa, you can build skills. Those skills can be third-party applications that could do anything you want to. Uber could build a skill that would let you to flag a taxi or whatever. And the question that the conversations that we were having in 2019 probably was, whose responsibility is it to kind of make that voice assistant ecosystem flourish? Is it Amazon's responsibility to really go out of their way to onboard the Walmarts and the Ubers and the eBays of the world? And is it Amazon's responsibility to create a playing field in that ecosystem that will allow all of those brands to flourish? And is it Amazon's responsibility to educate its customers and users of the platform that all of this stuff is possible to drive adoption? Or is it the responsibility of the brand to find a space in that ecosystem and them use their reach to their customers to drive usage of it? And so I'd be interested in your perspectives of the same question or same version of the question, which is you're knee deep into this technology, knee deep into this industry, and you can see the potential for where this can be amplified because it's just second nature to you. But it's not second nature to a lot of large enterprises. And it might not be second nature to some of your partners potentially. So, where do you think that this joined up, data driven, omni channel kind of like conversational future will come from? Is it going to be ultimately driven by the enterprises who will be exploring ways to do this because it's in their interest to do so to improve customer experience? Or will it be coming from LumenVox and its partners and those kind of areas who are aware of the technology and who can see that kind of future vision, or a combination of the two?
Well, so I'll go back to it. We still got a bit to go, and here's the point to make: is like just alphanumerics and addresses. There's still a hole there that I feel some of the bigger engines or bigger platform providers fall down on because they've been focused on longer conversational, whether it's transcription or any sort of NLU, NLP. Some of the simplest things tend to be the most difficult. So you've got to solve for that first. And that's still going to be really driven by these experiences and some of the partners I had just mentioned. In turn, the evolution of it, to kind of further answer your question, as you see different ways that brands and customers, enterprises want to make that experience for those customers, let's just say, again, I use the term delightful, I feel that they're going to be kind of driving how can you, platform provider, rethink this experience so that maybe there are certain KPIs on what they need to see in terms of customer feedback and repeat customer engagement and so on, that they're going to really force the industry to say, guys, get outside of your comfort zone. And where we come into play is that, again, we want to focus on providing the tools for them to do that, and so that they can in turn provide or build a better experience, and they can push forward that is innovative from our partner's brand perspective. But again, we're kind of the glue in many ways, if you think about it in terms of these new kind of next generation use cases. But long-winded answer, you're going to get driven by the likes of the brands who want to continue. The competition isn't stopping, right? It's not like all of a sudden everybody just drinks Coca-Cola and everything else goes away. You've got to constantly keep fighting, and I think that's where you're going to see the drive from these enterprises to really push the platform providers. And that uniqueness means, I have an Alexa, the whole house is wired with them, but I don't feel that the brand is going to say, let's move everything to Alexa. It'll just be a conduit. That experience is something which is going to be an on-channel driven one. And today that's not owned by a single entity. right? So it's that ability to be very versatile in all the different components of it. And you're going to see kind of the manifestation of that. But from our perspective, that we want to be part of the toolbox that's used by these players who are building these very interesting, let's just call them again, next generation experiences for customer engagement, and all the above.
It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, you mentioned there that it's not one company that is going to do it, but when I think about it, it makes me think about how even the kind of end client in all of this, the company that has the relationship with the end user, the average Joe or Josephine, who is at home or making the call or using the app or whatever, even those companies, their success also now depends on its partners as well. In that companies these days are not isolated companies like they were with, over time you'll get legacy infrastructure inevitably in all industries like banking and government. So there's legacy kind of providers that have always underpinned those companies. But would you agree that there is, or have you got anything to add on top of it, which is that companies today, because things are moving so fast, technology changes so fast, most enterprises wouldn't even dream of building their own voice biometrics or speech to text or text to speech or whatever it might be. They rely on partners that have not just got the technology, but also got the expertise to be able to implement the kind of stuff that's going to get them to where they need to be. So it's the whole world is becoming just this a mesh of partnerships, is it not?
It is, and that's a good point. Like, so I can't tell you how many times I've, over my career, talked to an enterprise or a platform provider, and when it comes to speech recognition, transcription, CPA, or any module in our stack for that matter, oh, we can build that. We can build that. The fact of the matter is that are you going to focus on something that's not your core competency, or are you going to bring in a tool that enables you to build that better mousetrap, right? And so where we focus and will continue to focus is that if we can build modules that make those experiences easier for anyone to create something unique, we'll continue to see the growth that we're seeing right now. And so it is this kind of partner, I think, ecosystem that's not necessarily going to go away, but where we feel the true value is because of how we've approached the market, is we're giving ownership to that experience so that we're not a threat in any way, whether to that partner, to that end customer. We are an ally and a tool that they can use to do something different and to do something better. And I think that's kind of where we take a little different approach to partnerships, because it is our goal to really be, the Swiss Army knife of speech, if I keep using these different analyses. So you can, it is definitely something where we just see the need growing, and you're going to continue to see that, and we're going to continue to see the need for customers who want to control, and partners that want to control their own destiny. And companies like Lumen are going to be the ones that help them control their own destiny.
Interesting. I couldn't have finished it off better myself. And for those of you that are wanting to learn a bit more, you can go to LumenVox.com, LumenVox.com, for those of you listening on the podcast. Shawn, thank you so much for joining us. Any other areas that you would direct people to? Any other things that they can check out, or what's the best way for them to go and learn more about LumenVox?
Yeah, if you come to LumenVox.com, there is a litany of information on there. You can check out some of our more recent blog posts on where we're seeing growth. You can always reach out to me. I'll definitely, I think most of you there on LinkedIn, you've got my profile. But we've been really working hard on building content so that how and where we see the market and where the market's going is going to be easily accessed at LumenVox.com.
Nice one. Shawn, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been absolutely amazing. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Kane. Absolutely. Pleasure's all mine.
Nice one. And thank you all for joining us. Do join us next week on Wednesday when we'll be talking to Alex Quinn, who's the CEO of Disruptal. I've mentioned Disruptal a few times over the last few weeks. They are doing some really interesting stuff. Voice assistants that can see. Really interesting. Shawn, if you haven't come across them, it is definitely worth checking out. They've got like technology that basically, if you're watching like Netflix or something like that, it will, you could ask like, who's the actor next to Samuel L. Jackson, or what car is James Bond driving, and a whole bunch of this crazy sort of stuff, and it pulls it up, and it kind of like shows you it, and you can then, the use cases or theoretical use cases is that once you've found that car James Bond is driving, providing it's in your price range, you can book test drives or do all that kind of stuff. So it's really, really
Oh,
interesting
very
stuff.
cool.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So
very
yeah.
cool.
We're going to be chatting to Alex next week, so please do join us then. Same bat time, 5 p.m. GMT, same bat channel, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, and on the podcast players of your choice. Thank you, Shawn, again. It's been an absolute pleasure, and thank you all for joining us. We'll see you soon.